Hi everyone, welcome and thank you for joining us today. My name is Jane Hewitt and I'm the Capability Building Coordinator at Connecting Up and TechSoup New Zealand. Connecting Up and TechSoup New Zealand are part of the Info Exchange Group, a not-for-profit social enterprise that tackles the biggest social challenges through the smart and creative use of technology. And for those of you who haven't attended a webinar with us before, Connecting Up and TechSoup facilitate an annual training calendar of online webinars, workshops, boot camps and webcons to help the social sector upskill in all things digital. And you can check out our training and education menu on both of the websites for the rest of the things coming up this year. So welcome today to today's webinar, Budgeting in Calxa with Mick Devine. And before we begin today, we'll just start with a bit of housekeeping. All lines are muted, so if you have any technical issues, please just type them into your questions box on your GoToWebinar panel and I should be able to help. And likewise, if you have any questions throughout the webinar, please type those into the Q&A box and we will answer them in the Q&A section that will come up at the end of the webinar. And please note that your comments and questions won't appear to the rest of the group. And if you're on a Wi-Fi connection and have multiple programs open, this can sometimes affect the quality of the webinar. So please just close any programs that you aren't using. And please note this webinar is being recorded and you'll receive a copy of the slides and the recording towards the end of today. And just one last thing, we do include a really quick short survey that will be coming up at the end of today's webinar, and we'd really appreciate any feedback. So that's all from me, and I will pass over to Mick to get things started.
Thank you, Jane. Welcome, everybody. Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are. So what we're going to do today is talk a bit about budgeting and different ways of approaching it, I guess. And if I can make my slides work. So first is how to get a quick draft of your budget, and an easy way to do that is to take last year and add a percentage to it. So I'll show you how we do that in Calxa and what that can do in terms of getting that first draft of your budget happening. Then we'll look at starting from the other end, from the detail. So the driver-based budgets, like how many people are working in this project, what do they get paid, how does that all build up to my wages, to my superannuation, that sort of thing. And then we'll talk a little bit about, the trade-off between time and accuracy in those different methods. And sometimes I think it makes sense to start one way but add in bits of the other way and the other way round. So let's go into a bit more on that. So when you want to do a quick budget in Calxa, we've got a tool called the Budget Factory that lets you create budgets for all of your projects, jobs, cost centers, whatever you call them, and you can do this in just a few minutes. So I might, I might just show you how that works so you can see it. So for those of you who aren't familiar with Calxa, we connect to the main accounting systems, so MYOB, QuickBooks Online, Xero, but you can also use Calxa with other systems as well by manually importing from a spreadsheet their actuals, your chart of accounts, etc. So in terms of the quickest way to get started with a budget, it's the Budget Factory. So under Budgets and Cash Flow, we go Budget Tools, Budget Factory, and most of the time you'll do it for the profit and loss. You can do it for the balance sheet as well, but I find that generally a bit less useful. And we can do this by project, and I can select all my projects here, and I've got 2, 5, 8 or 9 there. But I've done this in the past with an MYOB file that's got something like 700 or 800 jobs in it, and it works equally effectively. Or for a small organization with just at the organization level. I've got a couple of questions there from Steve already. Thank you, Steve. Does Calxa integrate with Xero, and if so, one way or two way? We do integrate with Xero, but we only pull information out of Xero. If you've got existing budgets in Calxa, in Xero, you can bring those into Calxa. You can copy them into a Calxa budget and edit them there. And yes, your program level budgets do aggregate up to the organization level. And I'll show you in a moment how that works. So I've selected all my different projects there. And my next step is to choose a source. And I'm going to use this year's actuals. And I'm going to put my budget into my current forecast. And I'm going to create a budget for 2022 and maybe 2023 as well. So I'm a couple of years ahead. Now I get a couple of warnings here. It tells me my actuals are only available up until February. That's because I haven't finished the March accounts yet. And so it uses my budgets for the rest of the year as part of the source data. So it'll use actuals up till February, budgets for March to June because I'm on a June year end in this organization. And I'm going to create a budget for the next 2 financial years. And it's warning me here that some of these have already got data, but I might skip the saving step at the end. And here we get the income, cost of sales, expenses, and other income and other expenses if you had them, and the net profit for your source year. And you can then say, next year we're expecting a 5% increase in our income, and cost of goods sold will be similar. We're expecting our expenses might increase a bit more than normal, so we'll put 7% there. The following year, things might be a bit tight, so we might go 3%, 3%, 3%, or something like that, yeah? So you can make those big picture, high level adjustments, and then you go to the next step, and it's just confirming the source there. It's warning me again that I'm going to overwrite data for 2022, and it's going to update all these different business units, which is the generic term that we use for jobs in MYOB, tracking categories in Xero, classes in QuickBooks, etc. And if I just went save budget now, that would then create those budgets with those parameters that I've just set in. I reckon if I did that, it'd be 60 seconds, but rather than letting you sit there, watch some bubbles spinning for 60 seconds, I might show you what the end result looks like, because here's one I prepared earlier. And you'll see here, my organization budget is read-only because it's automatically calculated by consolidating the project business unit budgets. And that's done here. And I can choose to consolidate my projects or my departments, not both, or not consolidate at all. And then my different projects are down the side here. And this is where we start looking at the more detailed line by line changes. And actually, I might go to a different one just to show you some of the simpler stuff first. And you can make some very quick and easy changes even at this stage. And so some of the things you can just type numbers into your budgets. That's not rocket science. You can type something in the total. So I could change this from 7,900 to, if I can do some maths quick, if I make it 15,800, I think that should double everything. My maths could be out there, but no, I got it right. So if you edit the total column, it changes. If there's nothing there at all, it will spread the initial amount equally. but if there's existing numbers, it will change them proportionally. So if I just put 120 in there, it'll give us $10 a month. And then you can do sort of normal things like copying and pasting rows, columns, ranges, that sort of thing. So that's, you know, all fairly normal stuff. You can budget for up to 20 years ahead. Nobody has yet told us that that's not enough. I remember when we first started back in 2020, in 2010, that we initially had a 4-year limit, and I can't remember why, but about 3 weeks before we released, our local women's centre came to visit us, and they needed a 5-year budget, and so we increased it at that point. Another question from Steve there saying, you could tailor manually for seasonality. Yes, you could. So what I have seen people do, if I just do a quick example here, is where you've got sort of different percentages of your income or expenses that you want spread over the year. You know, I have seen people, you know, put in, say, like 7% in this month, 7 in this one. This one's 9, 9, 11, 12, 9, 6, 4. I'm just making up numbers here, but you get the idea. 10 and 8. So that adds up to 100. So we've got that different proportionality. And then the actual number I want to budget for the whole year is $200,457. And it will then just spread that by those percentages month by month. Does that answer your question there, Steve? Good. So you've got flexibility there with the data entry of things. You can also, at the heading level, if you've got headings in your accounts in MYOB or QuickBooks, they'll come across automatically into Calxa. If you're using Xero, as I believe Steve is, we do have functionality called account trees that lets you rearrange your chart of accounts and put headings in there, and you can choose an account tree to use for your budget entry that includes those headings as well. So this grant funding, the services, etc., these are headings that I've created within Calxa. They're not in Xero because Xero doesn't have the same sort of headings in the chart of accounts. But as well as making those changes to the total rows, you can make changes to the total column. You can make changes to the total rows as well. So I can change this 44,000 for this line to 50,000, for example, in August, and 50,000 in September. I'm going to delete my formulas. I'm sure they weren't important. I've got some other ones somewhere else. So, and what that does underneath is just, again, just change each of the detail lines proportionally. So it's that same sort of spreading. And Steve's question is, does it serve not only as a budget creation tool, but also a management reporting tool? Yes, that is the idea. I mean, the budgets, I guess, are there to provide the reports to management, so you can report on them at the end of the day. Yes. So those are the sort of high-level methods of adjusting budgets, but there are times, you know, as I said, where you want to start at the more detailed level and build budgets from the raw components of whatever's driving your business. You know, in this simple example I've got here, I've got a budget where it's based on the number of cups of coffee sold times the price of coffee, you know, and if you were running a cafe as one of your projects, that would be a logical way to estimate your sales revenue. Probably something that's more universal in the not-for-profit sector is wages on a project based on the number of people working on that project and the rates that they get paid, that sort of thing. So let's have a look at how we would do that in Calxa. And I do have some that I prepared earlier. So as well as budgeting at the dollar level as we are here, we also have non-financial metrics that you can add into Calxa. And if I switch my view here to metrics per month, you'll see that I've got metrics for things like number of transactions, number of children that I deal with, number of sales, current members, and those sort of things. So you can use metrics for anything that's not part of that account level budgeting. And you can then use formulas within Calxa to build up your budgets from the raw components. And so in my example that I've got set up here, I've got 4 people who work in this department: Sarah, Fareed, Kanak, and Angela. And they all work a different number of days each week. And some of them get paid rate A and some of them get paid rate B. So maybe I'll step you through the process of how we build that budget as an example of then creating the wages budget and the superannuation budget and go from there. So with Sarah, she works 1 day every week. So I've created a formula here that's repeating, and I've set the amount as 1, the start date as Thursday the 2nd of July, because that's the first Thursday in the financial year, and I've said repeat every 1 week. You know, if she worked 1 day a fortnight, I'd repeat it every 2 weeks, yeah? And then you can specify which day of the week she works on and apply that formula. And if we look at how Fareed's set up, where he works 2 days a week, it's 1 day, or each unit is 1, repeat every week on Wednesday and Thursday. And you'll see that in July, that calculates 5 working days for Sarah, 10 for Fareed, but in August it's 4 and 8. In September, it's 4 for Sarah, but it's 9 for Fareed, because the end of the month or the beginning of the month is crossing over that Wednesday, Thursday. Yep, so it'll make those calculations so you get the right number of days each month. And similarly, I've got somebody here who works 3 days and somebody who works 4 days a week. And then for the daily rates, I've got a formula that I've just put a number in, and I could have just put 160, but I've just put 8 times 20 just because it's 8 times $20 for the hourly rate. And that formula just needs one side to it, it doesn't need any other side. And similarly, I've got 8 times $30 for rate B. And then to calculate the monthly pay for Sarah, my formula there is simply, if I scroll down here, Sarah's work days times daily rate A. And Fareed's is his work days times daily rate B. And do that for each employee, and I've calculated what their monthly pay is, and then I can go back to, oops, it's not the button I meant to press. If I go back to my accounts by month and scroll down to my wages, somewhere I've got wages there, and the formula for that is simply picking up the monthly pays for each of those 4 people. So it's just selecting those 4 and adding them up, and that gives me my monthly pay for this department. Does that make sense? I've got a couple of questions here. Let me have a look. Lisa, are state federal-based public holidays auto-loaded, or we would need to add these manually? Also, can we include an office close down period over Christmas, for example? That would need to be handled manually. You might need to have maybe another metric, which is the holiday days each month. So then the total days for each person is their calculated days less the holiday days, something like that. Might want a bit more thinking to get that precisely right, but it'd be something along those lines. But there is you're not the first person to ask, and there is there is a project for our team to look into how we can automate that a bit more. So once you've got that wages, you've then got the superannuation to calculate, and I think I saw my superannuation account was up here, and the formula for that is my wages and salaries account times 0.095. And again, you could create a metric for that superannuation rate, which would make sense for, you know, those occasions where it's going to increase. So if you wanted to factor in that's going to be, 10% next year, 10.5% the year after, and those changes, doing that as a metric rather than just putting the number in the formula makes that a bit clearer to see and a bit easier to work with, if that makes sense. So I think you've got the tools there to create some reasonably flexible budgets, because it's a structured out application. There is a trade-off there between the ultimate flexibility that you get with a spreadsheet, which we don't give you, but the structure and error checking that you miss with the spreadsheet. So there may be times when you've got a really complicated calculation to do, and it may make sense to do that in a spreadsheet rather than in Calxa. You can export the budgets from Calxa and import them back in again. And when you do that import back in, you can import just one line. So if you had a very complicated method of calculating your wages or your revenue or something, then you could do that calculation in a spreadsheet, bring that into Calxa, just that one or two lines, and it would update those, but you would still have the structure of everything else, the link to your accounting system, and that sort of stuff. So I think the big challenge when you're doing budgets is getting that trade-off right between how much detail do you go into, and how much time and effort do you put into the budget process. And I think there are times when both approaches make sense. I think something like the Budget Factory makes perfect sense for those things that don't change very much from one year to the next. If you've got a project that's funded for 3 years or 5 years, then it's quite likely that the details aren't going to change very much at either the revenue level or the expenses level. And the Budget Factory, with those high level changes, probably never makes sense as the end result, but I think it often makes sense as a starting point of that first run. Okay, what's this change going to look like? Where do we start from? And then from there, it's about looking in more detail at the important areas, rather than spending time going into that detail on on something that isn't going to change very much. So the Budget Factory will get you something very quick, very easily, but there are those areas where you also want to validate the content of your budget. Just because we spent 500,000 on wages on this project last year doesn't necessarily mean that we should spend $505,000 on this budget, on the wages budget for this project next year. And it may make sense to look at how many people are working on this project, what their skill levels, pay rates are, what the distribution of those is, and build it up from the bottom end. And I think especially when you have a brand new project, that makes sense, because otherwise, I guess we've all had occasions where we've plucked figures like 100,000 and 500,000 out of the air as a quick estimate of what a wages budget is going to be for a project. But when you've got to account to somebody for that decision, it helps to have the background information and say, okay, we've got 4 people at this level, we've got 3 people at this level, they get paid this, they get paid this, add it all together, and this is how we've built up to that 500,000. So I think there are times when it makes perfect sense to do that detail stuff, but we also need to recognize it takes time, and there are always other demands on our time, other things that we could be doing, and so we need to bear in mind that the importance of what we're doing. I had an interesting conversation with someone the other day who had an overhead project that they keep track of, and then they want to allocate that to 2 other projects based on number of staff that were working in those other projects. And that in itself made perfect sense to me, except then she wanted to allocate each individual line. So she wanted to allocate the wages from the overhead project and the and the rent and the electricity and everything else, and she was finding it very complicated. And I think we eventually agreed at the end of the day that it made sense to just have one line for the overhead allocation, and it was much simpler for her to calculate, much simpler for her to allocate and to do correctly each month. And so there are always these trade-offs between how we spend our time and when we take the shortcuts and when we go into the detail. And so I think, you know, we should always be questioning ourselves when we're doing our budgeting or any other process of, you know, what are the quick and easy ways to do this, but also when should we be doing the more detailed. So let's, and your timing's good, Steve. Steve's asked me if I'm going to demonstrate how to tailor the reporting formats. So let's look a bit at reporting on budgets, because it's all very well to get that information in there, but, you know, at the end of the day, you need to get it out as well, because you've got to present it to somebody and so on. So let's go to reports, and we do have lots of reports to choose from in Calxa, but you can generally filter them by these different categories on the side here, and whether you want numbers or charts or date ranges or P&L or balance sheet. So let's look at some of the favorite budgeting reports. So let's start with this one here, which is the P&L with projected total, which, despite the name, is actually one of the best ones for printing the actual budget. And I've got a question from Steve. Can you add commentary and append with non-financial and qualitative data? The answer to that is yes, but let me come back to you shortly on how. So this report here, normally when we use it, we show actuals year to date and then budget for the rest of the year. But if I take the tick out of this using actuals up to, I get budgets for the whole year, and I can show account numbers or not. And let's just do it as the simplest level first. And then I'll show you how we can complicate our lives or simplify them, as the case may be. So it's a very simple report showing the 12 months for the financial year and the budget for each line for each month with a total. And in this case, I've just done it for all my accounts: income, cost of sale. Well, I've done it for all the profit and loss accounts. Yeah, income, cost of sales, expenses, and I've got some other income there. And then I've got a net profit line at the bottom, which will show me my surplus for the year. Now, sometimes, and especially when you're doing that checking of the budget process, the review of it, you want that detail level, and that makes perfect sense. This one's actually come from a zero company, but the principle's the same with all of them. The account tree here will let us rearrange that chart of accounts. So if I select my board report there and do this at level 2, so the levels work the same way as they do in MYOB or QuickBooks, where level 1 gives you income, cost of sales, expense, level 2 gives you the next level of headers, etc. I select level 2 there. Let's refresh that report. And I now get a summarized view of that. Yeah, so I've just got 3 lines for my income now, and I've got my expenses broken up into admin, office, marketing, staff, operations. And I've actually run this at the organization level, but I can run it for each department individually or groups of departments. So if I chose Bob's departments there, for example, just pop that out again, make it a bit bigger for you. So Bob looks after 5 different departments, and we get a summary first. And one of the things you can do with the count trees, you can change the names of these totals. So instead of saying net profit here, I'm showing surplus deficit. And then I get each of his different projects that he looks after, 1 page for each one. So you can do these reports summarized at the account level, summarized at the project level, or granular with the detail. Yeah. And the idea is that once you've, with our reports, this is slightly off topic, but just while we're here, and it will lead into an answer to Steve's last question anyway, you can add these reports to a bundle, and let's create a new bundle. And I'm going to call this my budget reports. Create bundle. And my first report that I'm adding is Bob's summary. And I might make that the title of the report. And what that does is it saves all those settings and configurations. So I can just rerun this at any point, and it will give me the budgets at that summary level for Bob's 5 departments. Excuse me. Now, if I want to report on my budget and compare it to last year's actuals, for example, or last year's budget, let's do budget compared to last year's actuals. And I'm going to start this from next financial year to give next year's budgets. And I'm going to use actuals up to the current month, which is February. And no, hang on, let me go up to June 22. That'll do. Refresh that. So this is showing me next financial year's budget and compared to last year's forecast. So that forecast is using actuals up until February and my budget for the rest of the year. So it's comparing next year's budget with this year's actuals plus forecast to the end of the year. And if I then add that to my bundle, to my budget reports and last year comparison, change the report title, it adds that to the bundle, and then you can just drag them up and down to change the sequence there. Now, I've got a couple of questions from Steve here. You're good with the questions, Steve? That's good. I like the interaction, like the challenges too. So do the subheadings need to exist in the accounting system, or can you create them in Calxa? You can create them in Calxa. And I won't go into too much detail here, but you'll find them under report tools and account trees is what you want there. If that just comes up. maybe it wasn't a good idea to open a new tab. And then, so account trees are there, and you can just create different headings in here. I haven't picked up a good example, but so these headings here, you just add headers and you can create them there. Now, your second question, I'm interested not only in chart of accounts aggregation, but also the columns. Can you create a P&L with month-to-date actuals over time, year-to-date total, and then versus year-to-date budget? Yes, those totals tend to be pre-created, and I'll show you. There's in the actual versus budget reports here, there's lots of different combinations. So the actual versus budget here has month and year to date. This one has month, year to date, and last year. The unspent one has an option with, let's just have a quick look at this one. So there are different column options, and there is actually a report designer where you can customize the template, where you can choose what columns you want on actual report templates and that sort of thing. So this one here, we have lots of reports to compare actuals against budgets in different ways. So this one's got actuals budget variance for the month, year to date, the full year budget, and what's unspent or unearned, and the percentage that's been spent. So good for those projects where you want to keep track of, how we're going against the budget for the month and year to date, but also how we're going against the annual budget and what's left, those sort of things. So it's about giving you flexibility with that reporting, so that you've got options. You have different reports are required for different audiences. What you present to the board is different to what you need to present to a department manager, and it's about giving you the ability to provide each person with the detail that they need, so that they get the information they want, so they can say, yes, that budget works for me, no it doesn't, can we tweak this, can we change that? And since you've been good with questions, Steve, I will come back to just one of your other ones. In the report bundles, there is a document editor, and you can use that to create a cover page, for example, or you can also add notes to the bottom of individual reports with it. So that's how you can put commentary on your reports. And if I just go into one of those reports, like this one will do. No, it won't. That's not the one I wanted. If we just go to actual versus budget, or any one of the budget reports, to get the non-financial data onto reports, create a KPI from it, and that's beyond the scope of today's session, but you can just show KPIs here, and there's a bunch of inbuilt KPIs, but there's also you can also customize your own, either from those non-financial metrics or from groups of accounts. And I don't know if these ones are set up for this organization or not, but we'll find out in a minute. See if I break it. If I just pop that out. And with any of these reports, you can export them to PDF, Excel, rich text, etc. Now, if I just show you so I've got those KPIs at the bottom of each of the reports. So that's at the bottom of the summary one. And then for each department's one, you get those KPIs there. So that's the way to get the non-financial stuff there. In terms of distributing the reports rather than just manually exporting them, whatever, we have got workflows where you can say, email this bundle of reports to this list of email addresses on the 7th of every month at 4 o'clock in the morning, or whenever you choose to do them. So you would create a workflow for the distribution. And so, the idea is that, you've got your budget there. We've got different ways of putting that budget together, depending on whether you're starting at the top end, the bottom end, or a combination. Once you've got the budget there, we pull in the actuals from your accounting system and you can create a workflow so that happens overnight every night, and then distribute your reports with another workflow. So the idea is that once you've got things set up, it should be easy to produce those reports month after month. And Jane's going to send you the slides later, and I've put a few samples of some of the reports in there so you can have a quick look at those. And there's charts for, charts make sense for some people. They don't need to look at the detail of the numbers, especially on boards where you've got non-financial people there, but they're still responsible for the finances, so they still need to have information so they can make decisions, but it needs to be understandable to them, and that's what we've tried to present with our reports. It's about making them readable to people, without them needing an accounting degree. And just one final thing, we do have a donation program that we run through Connecting Up and TechSoup for most charities and not-for-profits with a turnover of less than $1 million. So if you're in that group, talk to the good people at Connecting Up and TechSoup, and they'll help you out. If you don't qualify for the donation, they'll be happy to help you with a discount as well. So talk to them, they'll look after you. Or there is a free trial on our website as well. We're actually based in sunny Townsville in North Queensland. So if you're in the area, call in the office. We don't mind talking to people. So
Brilliant.
does
Thank
anybody
you.
else? Yeah, anybody else have any more questions before we wrap up?
Yep, please feel free to. Steve's just asking, where are you based?
Yeah, I've just answered that one. We're in Townsville. Yeah. Have staff moored in the Townsville Marina. Yeah, sounds good. You bring your boat. We'll see if we can get a bottle of wine. Okay.
Brilliant. Thank you, Mick. That was really interesting. And thank you, everybody, for joining us today. And if you do have any questions for Mick, you can get in touch with us and we will pass over any questions to Mick. It's just events@connectingup.org. But we'll also include Mick's email and contact details in the slides and this recording that will be coming to your emails later on today. But thank you, everybody, for joining us. Thank you once again, Mick. That was really informative.
Thank you.
Yeah, if everybody could just take a moment to fill in the survey that will be popping up at the end, that'd be really appreciated. And we will see you. I can't remember what the date of our next webinar with you, Mick. Is it?
Oh, a couple of months' time. I can't remember exactly.
Yeah, in June,
yeah.
But please go along to the Connecting Up or TechSoup websites to check out the date and sign up for the next one. So brilliant. Thanks, everybody, and have a great day.
Thanks.
Cheers. Bye-bye.